Okay. First of all, what do you think of the glass?
It's cheap glass for sure. The thickness, it's the same as tea. So, like the thinner the stemware, the better, basically. But if you're going to carry it in your backpack, you want something that's not going to break. So this makes sense, I guess. Okay, well, this is much better wine, I can tell, just by the aroma. It's a lot more oaky, so it's been exposed to new oak, like maybe 20-30%. I think it's a Chardonnay. It's a bit tepid as well, so I don't know if it's filtered. And this is also a Chardonnay. That's our entry-level Chardonnay, the 2021 wild ones from Riverland. And this one, I think, I haven't tasted it yet. I'm pretty sure it's Brave New Wines Chardonnay. But let me have a taste. No, it's not Brave New Wines. Right, this is definitely a more premium wine for sure. But actually, it might be the Terra Sancta Chardonnay from Central Otago. It's hard to tell, I'm going to be honest. It is 11 a.m. and I just had a coffee. Probably need a bit more time with this one. Also, the wine's warm. Yeah, white wine must be chilled. Yeah, even red wine should be 15 to 18. Shouldn't be like room temperature.
I apologize.
This is the premium Chardonnay. It's young, I don't know, like 2022 or 2021 or something like that. I'm just going to go with the Terra Sancta from Central Otago. And this one I'm sure is the Riverland Wild Ones Chardonnay.
The verdict? You're right.
It was Brave New Wines, okay. So I sort of, yeah, I tricked myself out of that. Yeah, honestly, that drink's really classic. Yeah, I mean, that's, for a natural wine, that's quite a classic taste profile. Yeah, and that one, yeah, that was the one that I got right.
Oh, okay.
So almost 100%. So that's our house wine. So I mean, for me, that's a pretty easy guess. I think for me, the thing that gave it away is you can sort of tell that wine has been filtered and wine has not been filtered. This is a lot more cloudy. And yeah, it's really the difference between sort of something that's got quite a large production, something that's artisan, small production, and then the winemaking techniques are different. This probably has some additions as well, whereas this is pretty much just natural with maybe a bit, I think it has a bit of sulfur, so yeah.
So rule of thumb, murkier the better.
Well, actually the murkiness is, it can still be 100% natural and be this color. You just got to let it sit in the barrel for longer and not stir it. So that's the lees, which is in Japanese ori. So that just sits at the bottom of the barrel. So the longer the wine is in the barrel, like the less cloudy it gets naturally anyway. And then, but honestly, a lot of the natural winemakers, they stir it deliberately and they bottle it cloudy deliberately. But that's also a choice. It's not 100% necessary. Finding filtration is not necessary if it's a really premium wine. But I'll leave it up to the winemaker if what they want to do, if they want to make it a little bit cloudy or they want to keep it like clear. I think both is quite pretty. Like I said, I always encourage people to drink wine on a white table or some nice surface where you can actually appreciate the color. Because that's like, for me, it's like half the enjoyment of wine. Appearance, taste, and aroma. Actually, appearance is quite an important part of wine, which I think is why up until recently some natural wines had bad critical reviews because of the appearance. Now, I will say I've had some natural wines from other importers that are like brown, and I don't know what's going on there. That just seems like it's completely oxidized or something. And obviously it tasted horrible as well. So I'm not sure what was going on there.
Do you think you would have gotten it if I had picked 2 bottles of wine from another store, or because these are from your store?
It would be very difficult for me to get the actual producer, but I would hope that I would get like the variety and the vintage and the region. That's what you try to aim for. I mean, real super wine professionals, especially wine critics and stuff, they can taste like hundreds of wines per day. And it is interesting because there's vintage variation, but most producers have a consistent style that shines. Even if you're doing this kind of really natural wine, there is a consistency to it, which I think is why it makes wine an interesting and good product. So yeah, it's always disappointing when you can't recognize a wine. Like you should be able to really. Like the wine should speak of its place. And that's why it's like, for me, that's why it's like a superior alcohol to like say beer or sake or whiskey, any of those things, because they don't speak as much to the place. My name is Andrew, and I'm originally from Australia. I've been living in Japan for like 15 years, or maybe a bit longer now. I grew up in southeast suburbs of Melbourne, but you know, my family, both my dad's side and my mum's side, is from countryside. So I still have family in the countryside, and that's kind of my fondest memories of growing up in Australia, was going to my auntie's house, which is in the Yarra Valley, for summers. And then, you know, I also went up to my uncle's farm, which is in Albury-Wodonga. It's like a sheep farm, for a whole summer. And then we also had, during my childhood, we had a beach house. So we were pretty lucky, go to the beach. Like, yeah, school, like our kids are about to start school holidays. It's like 2 months, right? So, you know, it really is awesome. Australian lifestyle is great. A lot of time growing up in the sun, and yeah, so probably going to die of skin cancer. Anyway, hopefully not too soon. So when I first came here, like a lot of foreigners that are sort of long-term foreigners, I came here with the JET program, which is a Japanese, it's called the Japanese Exchange and Teaching Program. It targets like fresh graduates. So it's kind of like almost like a leap year program. And I did that for 3 years. And so that's, you can't choose where you go. And so I was placed in Kirishi, Gunma, which is about, it's not far, it's like about 90 minutes from Tokyo. It's not too bad. And then that's a contractor position. So after 3 years, I didn't really want to renew my contract. So I moved to Tokyo, and I've been in Tokyo ever since.
So did you have to save up money and stuff? And because it's a big move, right? A lot more expensive to live in Tokyo.
Not really that significantly more, because I think you just get a smaller place. Like now for family, it's like the cost of living is pretty brutal. Like, I mean, you've got to be doing really well. So for me, I just like miss the space. Like I'd rather have space and commute at this point. Like, you know, I'm turning 40 this year. But no, I didn't save. I mean, I don't think I saved any money, I can't remember, but I don't think I've had any savings since I was like in my early 20s. I did like a world trip. So while I was studying at university in Australia, I worked like really hard. And you know, casual rates in Australia, even back then, so this is a long time ago now, are super high. So you know, I could be earning up to $25, $30 an hour plus tips. Since then, I haven't had any savings, seriously. Yeah, I mean, what I have now is my company, which obviously has some value. So hopefully, when I sell that, I'll be rewarded for like hard work and stuff like that. But like when you run your own business, it's really hard to like have personal savings, because business always sort of comes first. So.
What kind of work did you do in Australia?
Yeah, so like you know, sort of my family's ethos is quite hardworking, and we're Catholic Irish on both sides. And yeah, I just remember when I turned 14, 9 months, that's when you can legally work in Australia. My mum was pushing me to get a job. So first job was like Burger King when I was like 15, and then McDonald's. And then, yeah, by the time I turned 18, I started working in these like, I don't think you have them in America, but they're like little gaming rooms. We say pokies in Australia. And so a lot of them, yeah, it's like a really small casino. So it's like you might have like 50 to 80 machines, or even less potentially, and no tables, nothing. And a lot of them are run through like the Return Service League or some other like non-profit. And so I worked at those type of gaming rooms, and occasionally I worked in the big casino as well in Melbourne. Because you require certain qualifications, the hourly pay is high. It's also like there's an element of danger because people are drug addicts and stuff, and gambling addicts and alcoholics. That's basically your customers. So yeah, interesting, good experience. So that's how I saved money.
When were you first exposed to wine?
Well, I've always loved alcohol, kind of thing. And me and my friends were really into Jim Beam, which now I just can't believe how sweet it is, right? It's like your taste change over time. So once I left Australia, right, there's less of a drinking culture, or at least my associates weren't as heavy drinking. So I did drink significantly less, I think, from the age of like around 23 to around about, basically until COVID. Like I didn't really drink all that much, surprisingly. Like even though I was doing a wine business for a few years before COVID. The origin story of why I started importing wine is also pretty long. You want me to get into it? So yeah, when I moved to Tokyo, first I was working for these American guys, actually members of this club, which is part of the reason I joined here. They really recommended it. And sort of older guys, and lots of experience investing in all sorts of different entrepreneurial stuff. And they'd purchased a bubble era defunct hotel group, and they're in the process of unwinding that and selling it to a company called Oedo Onsen Group, which is a pretty huge Japanese hotel group. And basically I came on board to help out with tidying up some of the assets. So when they sold the hotels, they kept some certain smaller assets like retail stores and like parking lots. And we had to work out what to do with all this stuff, like tennis courts, like all sorts of weird, a lobster tank, like all sorts of weird little things. So I did that, and that sort of, through that work, I was probably going around to onsen towns, 3 days out of a week. And that's when I started getting into wine, again, just as a consumer. And I wasn't thinking about a career in wine or anything, but I was getting more interested, even back to my, what we just chatted about, like my background. Like F&B is, especially beverage, is kind of huge in the hospitality industry. So it's like a really important way to get profitable. It's hard to make money on food. Well, it's almost impossible sometimes, especially if it's like a hotel or a casino. During that company, like being exposed to these guys, I thought it was time to go back to school. And having done the JET program, which is part of Mombuka Gakusho, I knew how to get a scholarship effectively. So I got a scholarship to do my MBA here in Tokyo, and then like the MBA in Japan. There's a Japanese component, which is optional, but I chose to do that. So it was really intensive. So I was doing morning classes, Japanese, evenings, the MBA classes, and I still had this like full-time job. So it was like really, really, really hard to manage it. So about halfway through the MBA, which is 2 years, I decided to quit because I basically couldn't handle the workload. And I was having issues with some of the people in the company, like not the owners, but like sort of subordinate. I was like a middle manager, which by the way is a horrible job. So yeah, this is too much. And then I met, at around about the same time, I'd met, as you often do in MBAs, like some cool people, and all of the same age, and wanted to do some stuff in Japan. So that's when we started this company, Colonial Trade. And from day one, we were fully licensed and stuff like that. So we could do alcohol. So we like dabbled in beer, but quickly learned. Well, I probably should have already known. But, Japan has the 4 biggest beer companies in the world, basically. So kind of difficult to sell beer. And beer has a shelf life of only, by the time it gets from the brewery to in the market, like the shelf life is not long. You've got like 6 months basically before you've got to effectively clear it. So that was pretty tough. So the main thing that we had success with was dry fruits and nuts. My business partner had a lot of connections in Thailand with manufacturers and stuff like that. So our price point was like super competitive. So we're literally outpricing like these huge shosha. So we could get some really big contracts. Of course, we ran into some difficulties with quality assurance and stuff like that. And it was a steep learning curve. But it was pretty enjoyable time, stressful but enjoyable. But then after about 18 months of doing that again, or maybe almost 2 years, my business partner was looking to move on, and I knew that like once he exited, like he was Thai. I needed it really tough for me to replicate what he was doing on the buying side. So I predicted that, all right, this relationship's probably going to fall apart at some point. So I wanted to hedge my bets. And by this stage already, I was feeling like I'd been gone from home for a long time, because even before I came to Japan, I traveled, like I said, for about a year. And so I thought, I want to import something from Australia, give me an excuse to go home more often and see family and friends. And obviously my first thought was like dry fruits, nuts. But to be honest, like Australia really uncompetitive, poor quality, really high price. So I wasn't, with the experience I had, I was like, nah, this is not going to work. Like it really would be crazy to even try. If I could manufacture it myself, I think I could make it a competitive product. But the manufacturers I talked to didn't seem to understand like the concept of dry fruit and why it should be priced low. And anyway, that's like really technical. So I've got a lot of experience in that mass production of fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. And so I wanted to use it, but unfortunately, really couldn't find a partner. And so I was thinking, what's the best next thing? Like, what is something that Australia is good at? And then, like, having been from the Yarra Valley, it was kind of like common sense. And honestly, I didn't know it was going to do any good at all. So, like, the first shipment, I think I paid by credit card or something, and it was like one pallet, so like 56 cases of wine. And somehow, I don't even remember how, but it must have been a nightmare. But anyway, I got it all together and shipped it, because it's coming from all over Australia type thing. Shipped it, and I just started like that. Had to complement my portfolio for a while using other importers' wines. But at the time, honestly, when I started, there was not much competition for, especially Australian wine, but more particularly like this sort of natural organic wine. So I really didn't mention that, but the dry fruit angle that we had was also that it was high quality, comparatively speaking, and either reduced sugar or no added sugar, and no sulfur as well. So that was my sort of angle when I came into wine. Obviously, again, I'm starting from like zero experience. So if I had had more experience or even just done more research, I probably would have attracted more famous, internationally famous natural winemakers and organic guys from the start. Like the Tokyo natural wine market is huge. It has been huge for a long time, for like well over a decade. And that's, when I started my business. So my timing was right, really perfect timing. So I had the right idea, but my execution obviously could have been better. But even so, we've grown steadily. And we were doing really well until 2019. And then, sort of everyone knows what happened in 2020. And the thing about people who weren't in Japan at the time probably don't realize is Japan was the second country hit. And so like early, probably February, I want to say, like 2020. And, the sort of ridiculous, crazy restrictions on alcohol trade didn't really stop until like 2022. So it was like 2 full years of like effectively crippling my business, which is a wholesale business. To compensate for that, we launched into retail businesses and stuff like that, because you could actually sell wine to people to drink at home, but you couldn't sell wine to restaurants, bars and stuff like that. And of course, we were a pure player on-prem wholesaler. So we literally didn't even have any wine shop accounts, like by design. So thank Christ we had a sort of, it wasn't really designed as a shop, but it ended up morphing into a shop in Meguro. And that sort of, I just suspended all purchasing. And then that shop was sort of, at first, everyone was panic buying a little bit. So, we had a good, probably up until halfway through 2020, we were surviving okay. But then as time went on, we had to take on debt, at lower interest rate, but it's still debt. And then, we opened up a second store, which was about 3 years ago. So, I thought that COVID was over kind of thing. But then we got hit by the Omicron. So the first 3 months was great. And then they shut it down again, alcohol. And by that stage, everyone was just tired of it. So there was no boost to retail at all. And, some of our best clients were ski resorts and stuff. So they all went back to zero again. So it's really, really rough. And then since then, we really haven't, to be honest, recovered. Our revenue and stuff's continued to grow. So we should be over, Ichioku-en, which is 100 million yen or whatever, next financial year. But, with the exchange rate as well, that's nothing. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's just, there's a lot of negative headwind. So we've got huge inflation, huge supply chain issues, storage cost blowouts, and then on top of that, the weakest yen in forever, basically. And so every time I order something, by the time it actually gets here, the price has already increased by I just checked the other day, the last order is 5-6%, the exchange rates moved. I mean, it's pretty brutal. And then, when you clear customs, also, you don't really get the actual, exchange rate, because it's a Japanese government exchange rate. So it's a Visa international exchange rate plus 2 or 3%, right? I think people misunderstand Japan because, it's a super price sensitive place. The average wealth of people here is below England. So most people in Japan are pretty poor. By Western standards, at least. So that's one fact. The second fact is Japan's just a tiny wine drinking market. So, I mean, 2 bottles, something that's 2 liters, which is about 3 bottles per capita per year, which is in France, it's 40 liters, right? To put in perspective. So French people are drinking wine constantly. America's 7. And then Australia is 10 or something like that. So really low consumption rate. And I think that data is probably wrong anyway, because a lot of that wine that's consumed is consumed by inbound people, which is, again, something that I didn't really think about much until COVID hit. But a lot of our restaurant clients, half of their clientele is tourists, basically, if that makes sense. So even if it's not a hotel, even if it's just a restaurant, the location or the brand, it appeals to tourists more than it does to Japanese people. And then, of course, there is a wine market here. And the great thing about Japan is that after a certain price point, there's no price sensitivity. It's all about brand and reputation. So I don't really see any difference in the volume after something gets over 6,000 yen, which is about what? In this, maybe $40 American or whatever these days, or less, to $200. There's no real volume difference, because once you get to the point where you can afford something that's almost 10,000 yen, yeah, it doesn't seem like there's much of a price barrier until you start getting into the sort of crazy over 50,000 level. So yeah, that's my wine journey. Everything's changed so much since there's been so much turbulence. So I really I really didn't appreciate how easy it was to do business prior to COVID and how much harder it is to do now. There's so many different factors and so many pressures that never existed previously, really. And it's not getting any easier. It keeps snowballing. So, well, I mean, Japan's great. People here are very loyal and stuff like that. But there's just not enough people. There's not enough young people. And like, there's a combination of factors that make it super challenging for us to get any decent employees. First of all, it's a general thing. So if you go, like, even where we're sitting right now, it's like kind of has a great reputation, great place to work in hospitality, but they're always short of staff, right? Even though they're offering really generous conditions, a great work environment, all that kind of stuff, and they still can't find people. And then you've got us, on the other hand, and we're in a similar field. We're in the same field, really, hospitality. And the thing about hospitality people is they will choose their work not based just on financial things. So even if we're offering like a really competitive salary, we're not going to attract people. People are more worried about like permanency, I guess. So which refers to like the kind of size of your company. Is it a part of a group? Like, you know. So yeah, it's kind of lifetime employment, like amazingly for me, but that's still a huge concern for Japanese people, which for me is really baffling because it's really stupid to have that attitude in the 21st century. But that's one factor. Second factor is, you know, like I said, you're not doing hospitality to become rich, really. Like it's very rare to be a pure hospitality person who becomes like, you know, a millionaire or a multi-millionaire. But it's a great lifestyle. And because of that fact, I think people choose the company they want to work with based on not just salary and stuff, based on lifestyle. So what wines am I going to be working with? Where is the location? Like, who am I going to be working with? Do I feel comfortable working for a foreigner? All these kind of things. So, you know, and so there's so many factors, but I think small business is a huge no. So that's one thing. Second thing is our portfolio is very niche. It's focusing on Australian and New Zealand wines, which just aren't really that popular amongst wine professionals here, unfortunately. You know, there might be like maybe 20 sort of Australian, New Zealand wine experts in Japan, whereas it'd be like 3,000 champagne experts, you know what I mean? And that just sort of flows through to everything because, yeah, if the wine professionals don't really want to work with it, and then the consumers aren't familiar with it, so yeah, it's quite nichey, and it's never, in my experience, there's very few restaurants in the whole country or bars or whatever that actually have a Australian, New Zealand leaning. And the ones that are like terrible customers. So I know their business is not doing great. You're talking about a mixed case of 12, like once a month, something like that. So, you know, they're just not doing any volume. So yeah, and yeah, so I think like you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel kind of thing, which is really frustrating for me because obviously every day I'm interacting with wine professionals and, you know, I know they're earning less than my staff, but they're working way harder, they're way more dedicated, they're way more professional. To be honest, I've literally never had an applicant that was a wine professional in reality. Like, you know, they might have some qualification, but anyone can do that. It takes like 2 weeks. So it's not a huge thing. And, you know, most of the people with wine qualifications only wanted to work for 1 day a week or 2 days a week or, you know, and it just becomes like a nightmare to manage. So I'm trying to like wind back that retail side of the business and just focus back on wholesale and restructure again. So it's sort of like the whole, I think my main error was during COVID, instead of just doing nothing and maybe starting up, doing research, I kind of got sucked into the whole like pivot and all that, like, you know, those buzzwords that were floating around, you've got to pivot and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I kind of fell into the trap of pivoting when in reality what I should have done, like assuming that things would change permanently. Whereas in Japan, like, you know, I think in other countries, it has, like, people work from home a lot and stuff like that. But in Japan, like 99% of people are back at the office, like, do you know what I mean? And no one's drinking at home anymore. Like like everything in Japan doesn't really seem to change much. So, I don't think there's been any uptick in the amount of people drinking like quality wine at home. So sort of that kind of eliminates the reason for having those stores, because there's just no demand. And honestly, I think we're doing fairly well, but it's just nowhere near good enough. Like, location is not good. The products are not in high enough demand, and we struggle to have staff. Like, we struggle to be open. And then when we are open, our staff, poorly trained, and not really committed. So it's pretty tough. So if I can sell the company, I'll be very happy. Because the thing about it's really frustrating is that I know the company could do really, really well if we had some like financial steel behind us, because the company is financed by me. I've only ever had one outside investor, and he's invested a very small amount, right? If we had like, a lot of wine companies have like Kewpie or Kikkoman behind them, right? So they effectively have like an unlimited cash bank. And, I know what I'm doing, so I'm really good at what I'm doing. The problem is I just need some help, kind of thing. And we have great clients too. We have all the best clients. Everyone knows who we are. But the problem is we struggle to service our clients well. But again, it's because of the financial side. Because, we always get into a situation where we either has too much stock or we don't have enough stock. It sounds like, it's easier to solve, but actually it's not, especially not with wine. Like, I would rather just go broke than be selling wine that's like damaged, like, because it's been sitting in a dry dock during the Japanese summer for 6 months, right? So, I kind of tailed off. What was my point? At this point in time, I don't regret it, but the story's not over yet. I want to stick with the wine industry. I like it. I have a lot of experience, and it's a great industry. I like the people. And most people are pretty friendly. So that's my little answer, I guess.